So recently I put together a top 5 worst CPU video, and for whatever reason you guys seem to love the hell out of that one. I had a heap of requests to do the same with GPUs, so today we're going to see what that looks like. Remember, this is just meant as a bit of fun, and if you have one of these GPUs nestled away on your graphics card, don't be offended. We're certainly not saying you're stupid for buying one or anything like that, just meant as a bit of fun, so let's get into it. Kickstarting the worst GPU picks, I decided to go mobile. Born mobile, baby. Some of you might have got that. Anyway, for the longest time now, mobile gaming's been pretty rubbish if I'm honest, and AMD's latest efforts on that front are about as ordinary as it gets. The Radeon RX 400 series actually represented pretty good value on the desktop, though in comparison to Nvidia's GeForce 10 series, it wasn't the most power efficient. This sadly didn't bode well for the Radeon RX M400 series, the M of course indicating that this is a mobile part. The RX 470 was the budget king on the desktop, and it was really the must-have sub $200 GPU. For laptops though, it was the must-avoid at all costs GPU. The RX M400 series proved so bad for laptops that very few brands even offered models supporting them. As just mentioned, power consumption was the key issue here, and that causes a knock-on effect for mobile parts that destroys pretty much everything. The poor efficiency meant that AMD had to cut the Radeon RX M470X down to 896 stream processors from the 2048 SPUs of the desktop part, a massive 56% reduction. This meant that the mobile RX 470 performed at best like a desktop RX 460, and if you recall, the 460 was embarrassingly slow. Ultimately, this meant that the Radeon M470X ended up offering RX 460-like performance, with power consumption that was comparable to that of the significantly faster GTX 1060. So laptops that used AMD's solution were thick, loud, and sadly much slower. I have to admit I had a seriously hard time trying to work out which GPU I should pull the trigger on for this category. I really wanted to only go back a few years to keep the pick somewhat relevant, and I narrowed it down to a few options from both AMD and Nvidia. I ended up though settling on the Radeon R9 285, the model that unveiled the GCN 3rd generation architecture in late 2014, about a year after the original Radeon 200 series cards were first introduced. There really are so many reasons why I picked this GPU, but I'd say chief among which was just the terrible timing of the release. As I said, it was almost a year after the first 200 series models arrived, and that meant that the R9 285 wasn't released till September 2nd, 2014, and it came at an MSRP of $250 US. Back in 2014, I wrapped up my review by saying this. At $249, the R9 285 doesn't exactly redefine the landscape, with only 4% more performance on average than the card it will be replacing, the R9 280. Even if you discount the big loss in Tomb Raider, which could possibly be driver related, the R9 285 is still just 6% faster than the R9 280. Bringing a 4 to 6% boost for the same price obviously isn't bad, but we're not sure the R9 285 was completely necessary either. I also noted that the Sapphire card was overclocked by 5% from factory, so that could inflate the scores by 2 to 3%, making the margin between the R9 285 and R9 280 even thinner. The R9 285 did come with FreeSync support though, and enhanced DirectX 12 capabilities, but at the same time, neither of those were terribly useful back then. Another and possibly even more serious issue was the arrival soon thereafter of the GeForce GTX 970, which was released the same month, and it offered considerably more performance for a mere 30% increase in price. So within the same month of its release, the R9 285 faced a serious price cut just to remain relevant. Ultimately, there really was nothing wrong with the R9 285. Perhaps the 2GB VRAM buffer was questionable, but the main issue being that it was just released too late in the game and came right before the GTX 970. And of course, even before the GTX 970 arrived, it just didn't change anything in the market, and ultimately disappointed with the latest iteration of the GCN architecture. It was really a bit of a buzzkill, you could say. It's hard to believe that the GeForce GTX 780 series is roughly 4 years old now. That said though, it is really showing its age. When compared to the R9 390, the GTX 780 has certainly slipped further behind today, and it's no secret now that the Kepler architecture just hasn't aged well. It's either down to the architecture itself or Nvidia perhaps neglecting driver development, or maybe just a bit of both. Either way, we've never seen an Nvidia architecture fall away quite like how Kepler has. Kepler also marked the birth of the insane $1,000 Titan series, and really set the tone for Nvidia's enthusiast boning tactics. You know, where they release a $1,000 model and later that year release a product that delivers pretty much the same or perhaps even better performance for a much easier to swallow price, like what they did with the GTX 780 Ti. Yep, it has to be said the GTX 780 Ti seemed like the ultimate gift to high-end gamers in late 2013, and then by 2015, the ultimate curse. Today, the Kepler-based GPUs have become so nerfed in modern games, they're really no longer worth even buying. You'd have to pick up the once mighty GTX 780 Ti for pocket change to even consider it. It's really not a great deal faster than the GTX 1050 Ti and a lot of modern titles, but it uses around 150% more power. Thankfully though, we are yet to see a noticeable decline in performance for the following generation, the Maxwell-based stuff. The GTX 970, 980 and 980 Ti still perform very well in modern titles, but as always, we are keeping a close eye on this stuff. Well, there were a few candidates for this category, but come on, who's going to dispute this pick? The Pascal-based Titan range doesn't get any more confusing, strange, bizarre than that. So, Nvidia wowed the world when they announced an insane Titan X, and I don't mean the Maxwell-based Titan X in 2015. That was the GeForce GTX Titan X. I'm, of course, talking about the Nvidia Titan X. Yeah, the Pascal version. Okay, so confusingly on August 2nd, 2016, we got a second graphics card from Nvidia to be named Titan X. Since this was all very confusing, some of us reviewers decided to rename the Pascal-based Titan X to the Titan XP. XP was cool for a few reasons. Obviously, the P stands for Pascal, but XP or experience points is also something you are rewarded with in modern games. You get enough XP and you can level up. So it was a bit of a fun play on that. So while a questionable and still quite possibly dumb decision by Nvidia's marketing team, we all just moved on and got on with the benchmarking. Then a little over half a year later, Nvidia's marketing team decided to troll us all once again and actually released a Titan XP. Can you believe that? Well, you probably can because it happened like 5 months ago now, but still. I mean, the point is it really even stupidity at this point? It just seems like an obvious trolling attempt to me. Nvidia stylized it as Titan X little p, and for a while there we had the Titan X big P, and now we had the little p. I gave up on that though, it was a fun joke for a little bit, but it really just got too stupid and annoying to continue with. Anyway, as it turns out, the Titan XP can only be purchased through Nvidia for an eye-watering $1,200 US, and it's really no faster than a custom GTX 1080 Ti for gaming. Okay, so wrapping things up, it's time for me to pick what I feel is the worst reference card design by either AMD or Nvidia in the past few years. To be honest, it might have actually been easier to pick one that didn't just flat out suck. That might have actually been harder. Looking over my short list of candidates, I have to say there was definitely more from AMD on that list than there was from Nvidia. Don't get me wrong though, Nvidia has had some shockers over the years, but with a much larger budget to work with, they've been largely able to correct the poor designs of the past. Plus, they're now charging a price premium for their reference card, the Founders Edition, so that kind of seems like cheating. Anyway, we didn't have to go too far back to find an AMD reference cooler that doubles as a leaf blower. One of my favourite AMD GPUs of recent memory was the Radeon R9 290. It was an amazingly good value buy. Although I did initially test the reference model back in 2013, we still gave it an overall score of 95 out of 100, one of the highest scores we'd given a GPU at the time. That said though, I did note that thermal results were less than desirable, and this added to my anticipation of third-party designs. The R9 290 screamed like a jet, but I was confident board partner models would be much better, and indeed they were. Sadly though, it was a long 2-month wait before we got quality board partner cards that could tame the R9 290. Unfortunately, rubbish reference designs are still the bane of AMD's existence, and they seem unable to do anything about it. Money is obviously a key issue here. The RX 470 reference card design, for example, was another abomination, and Vega 64 air-cooled looks to be one of the worst results yet. We should probably just start calling them AMD throttle card designs. Now with automatic underclocking to save your ears. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed that. I certainly had a lot of fun putting it together. Of course, please let me know your thoughts on the picks and let me know what your picks look like. As always, love to hear your input. Also, if you happen to have a computer with an older GPU, maybe something Kepler based, and you want to upgrade, then check out my new Upgrade My PC Please series. It's a heap of fun, and there's always loads of cool prizes to be won, so make sure you check it out. I'm your host, Steve. See you again soon, guys.